Now we're continuing our long strange journey here. I wanted to point out a very interesting question that has been raised in class. What if we want to use an independent variable that has more than two levels? If we're going to be using a continuous level variable, that's going to be what's called the analysis of variance, which we will not cover in this class. However, we can begin to look at things a little bit this way if we use a crosstab and if we use individual items, the individual Likert items like we see on the screen here. Now this is going to be a little bit of a complicated video because there's a couple twists and turns here. So I'd like for you just to feel free to stop and replay as works best for you. Let's take a look at just one item, number 7. Most of my friends think it's okay to use alcohol, drugs before having sex. Now, let's suppose we are looking at our religion, how religious are you, and we keep that in its original 3-level form. I want you to think for a moment, and I'm going to be quiet. I want you to think for a moment what people will check off. What responses would you expect from people who say they are very religious? Are people who say they're very religious going to strongly disagree with the statement that most of their friends think it's okay? Or are they going to strongly agree? Or are they going to be somewhere in between? So I want you to think about that, and I'm just going to pause right here. I want you to. Now I've come back and I am thinking about when these data were collected back in 1995, and so almost 20 years has gone by since these data were collected, and a lot of things have happened to the data set along the way. What has happened, I am sure, is that these variables have been recoded, similar to the recoding that you saw earlier, so that if they said a 1, they got a 5. If they said a 2, they got a 4. If they said a 3, they stayed a 3. If they said a 4, they became a 2. And if they said a 5, they became a 1. They were recoded into a new variable. Unfortunately, back then we didn't recode into a new variable, we just recoded back into the same variable. So I think what we should see is that for people who are very religious, that they are going to be right down here, strongly disagree that their friends think it's okay to use alcohol and drugs. I think. So let's just take a look at how we might do this analysis. So let's go over to SPSS here. Let's go cross-tab these data. We're going to analyze, and I've done this, so it's going to pop up. I'm going to go here and reset this. Let's go back for a moment to our, this is item C7. We're in section C, and it's number 7. Okay? All right. So we want our independent variable to be how religious are you? Where is that? That's our independent variable, so it goes in our column. And our row comes down here, and it's going to be this C7. Now this is just an individual Likert item, and several of these items were added together to come up with that pure norm variable that we used a couple videos ago with the t-test, with this recoded how religious are you. Now if you don't want to recode that how religious, then you have several alternatives. This would be one, would be to look at how religious in the 3 category version versus the Likert item, just the single item. Now this is not the very best way to do it, but it's not the worst way to do it. Okay, so we want to have statistics here. We want to look at the chi-square. We want to look at the cells. We want to look at the observed, but we want to make sure we look at the column, because the how religion is the independent variable and C7 is the dependent variable. Okay, let's take a look at this. Well, first of all, we see that we have a p-value less than 0.001, so we know that there's an association here that the groups are different. I think what has happened here, so let's just step through this, and this is a little confusing, and so maybe we can talk about this in class. Those who are very religious should be very high and strongly disagreeing with the statement that most of my friends think alcohol and sex are okay. I think what's happened is that a 1 has become a 5, and so they're actually down here. 23.8% of those who are highly religious said they strongly disagreed, but it got moved to a 5. What failed to happen was that we failed to change the value labels. That's why we saw in the t-test that there were higher values for those who were religious. So let's just forget these labels for a moment. Okay, and so we have 23% of those who are very religious say a 5, 17% of moderately religious, and 7% of not at all religious. And we'll see this trend is kind of begins to get turned on its head as we go through this, so that by the time we get to kind of deviant approval of deviant behavior, we see that 22% of those who are very religious actually are agreeing to this idea, whereas 43% of those who are not religious are actually agreeing. The two should be agree. And this is statistically significant at this level. Now this would be a great topic to bring up in class because it points to the idea of the importance of recoding into a new variable, something that the data manager did not do in this case, and has led to a great deal of confusion here. Okay, so now before we stop this, we can talk about this problem with recoding in class. I'm very happy to do that. But I want you to understand that we are using a type of test that's designed for nominal data, and yet we're using ordinal level data here. Very religious, moderate religious, is not at all religious is an ordinal variable, and the Likert scale is an ordinal variable. So we're kind of violating the idea here. Let's try one more analysis. I'm really not sure if this is going to work out. Let's go to the descriptive statistics, the crosstabs, see if there's any other kinds of statistics in there. Here's something called the gamma distribution, and I'm not sure what it's going to show. So we'll just give it a try, see what happens. Well, we still get a significant difference, and what's happened here is the gamma distribution, which we're not going to talk about in class other than the idea that it builds into our analysis the actual ordinality of the variable. And we're going to stop this right now because this has gotten a little bit too long, and I want to take one last video just to review what we've done.